in terms of the characteristics and who's in charge in each. Okay, and we'll get into all of this. We'll do this today, we'll start this today, and we'll get to this on Thursday and then into period 6, because it's a longer process. The first is presidential Reconstruction. When Lincoln is in charge, and then later Johnson is in charge, and the approach to Reconstruction is much more one of reconciliation. Putting the country back together, of union, of peace, and not of punishment. By 1867, we'll get into this today as well, the radical Republicans have taken over enough of Congress that they are veto-proof. We'll get into that math of that as well a little later. That they can pass whatever the hell law they want, and they have enough votes in Congress that even if Johnson vetoes it, and he vetoes a lot of things, they can override his veto with enough votes that are pro-radical Republican ideology that his veto is meaningless. We'll go into that today as well. That falls apart in 1877. We'll get to that on Thursday with the Compromise of 1877, which ends Reconstruction. And that gives us our southern period of redemption, when the South, much of the southern states, go back to the way things were, just without slavery. We'll get into that later. Okay? So the first approach to Reconstruction is actually Lincoln's. He's already planning for Reconstruction before the war is over, which is kind of cool. If we know we're going to win, here's the plan for after the war, even though it's not over yet. And his approach is called the 10% plan. He signs his Proclamation of Amnesty and Reconstruction in 1863. So a good chunk of time before the war is over, in which he promises a full presidential pardon, which means government forgiveness. You will not be charged with a crime if you take a new oath of allegiance to the Constitution and to the Union, and you agree that, yes, slavery's over. That's it. Pretty good deal. Would you consider this harsh or lenient? Lenient. Yeah, super lenient. Absolutely. Further, once 10% of the people in your state, just 10%, have taken this oath, that yes, we are loyal to the Union, yes, we agree slavery is abolished, once 10% of people in Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, once 10% of those people took that oath, your state can come back into the Union. Very lenient. But again, that goes in line with Lincoln's approach. Malice towards none, charity to all. During Reconstruction, during the Civil War, the Republicans in Congress counter with their own plan. Some of you asked about this last week. I said, don't worry, I'll get into it on Monday. The Wade-Davis bill, named for two congressmen, Wade and Davis. Good name. Good name. Yeah. It's a 50% plan. And even that 50% is a higher ask within that 50% than is Lincoln's 10. So if 50% of the voters in your state promised allegiance to the country, then you're good. However, you're not just going to come back in as is. You have to have a new state constitutional convention to write a new state constitution. We're not going to let your state back in until you meet all of these demands. New state constitutional convention before you even elect any officials in your state. Important. And there's going to be some specific things each state's going to have in their constitution that would safeguard freed slaves' liberties and freedoms before we even think about letting you back in. So the radical Republicans have a much higher threshold to get back into the nation than does Lincoln. The two theories this is based on, one comes from Charles Sumner, and that's the state suicide theory. He's arguing the states killed their pact with the Union when they seceded. So they should have to start over from scratch. Just have a new convention, have a new state constitution, and then we'll debate whether bringing them in or not, much like they're just a territory. They killed their association. They killed their union, so they should have to start from the very beginning, like Kansas did, like California did, like any new state would have to do. We can't just let them back in as is. The second theory this is largely based on comes from Thaddeus Stevens, another important name you should know from the Republican camp. Thaddeus Stevens is arguing differently. He's saying, forget whatever state they were a conquered province. We beat them in a war. And much like the territory acquired from war with Mexico or anybody else, they should have to go through the same process as a conquered province as anybody else would. We won the war. We invaded the South. We won. That's our land now. Let them start from scratch, and they should be treated as such. So obviously a much harsher, a higher threshold for getting into the Union for the Republicans in Congress. But Lincoln vetoes this during the Civil War. He does not allow this bill to go into practice during the Civil War, but in 1867 they're going to apply a very similar logic. We'll get there today as well. No, wait a minute. So let's think for 1 minute. We want to look at this and be like, look at these Republicans with their high, lofty morals, their ideals. How noble of them to want to make sure that these Southern black people are well taken care of. But let's think for a second. Selfishly, why would they want to make it hard for the Southern states to come back in? Take 20 seconds, talk to your partner. Selfishly, why would the Republicans in Congress want to make it difficult for Southern states to re-enter the Union? 20 seconds, go. What did you do, nutrition? Political. All right, let me stop you guys there. Just using our political logic, why would these people want to keep these states out? Maddie, go ahead. I like that hand up.
So they can promote their ideals?
Yeah. What are their ideals? Take a shot and then take a shot.
Like the ideas such as that one law, such as
That one law.
the Pacific Railroad.
Yeah, the Pacific Railroad, the Homestead Act, all this stuff they've been doing. If we let the Southern states back in, what political party are most of those Southern representatives going to be representing? Yeah, Democrats. So we've had this nice time. The Republicans are like, oh, we can pass this, we can pass that. Oh my God, they're going to come back and make it hard for us. What else is now canceled in the Constitution? The 3/5 clause. So now every one of those freed slaves no longer counts as 3/5 of a piece of population. They count as 5/5 of a piece of the population, which means the South will now be getting more electoral votes in the Electoral College, more House of Representatives members. And if, in theory, we have all of those freed slaves vote, which party do you think they're going to identify with? You think the Republicans. Why?
Because they freed them technically.
Yes, yes. But that's a big if, right? If we can guarantee they vote. Good. Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you said that, like, if, well, since a lot of the population in the South is, like, slaves, like free slaves,
Uh-huh.
wouldn't that affect their votes because they're uneducated, so you don't know whether, like, what would be better for the country or not?
That's another big question, is if we had, at the beginning of our nation, a property requirement to vote, because that ensured that there was some sort of buy-in to the process, and you were educated, then maybe we should do the same thing now. Let freed slaves get some education first and then vote. But there's a whole bunch of gray area on that. It's a good question. And that's going to lead me to my next slide as well. So, right, good question. So these are the two approaches to Reconstruction, presidential versus congressional, lenient versus harsh, low threshold versus high threshold, and it's important to know the difference. So here is Lincoln's plan. I've already gone over it to an extent. This idea of malice toward none, charity to all. His vetoing of the Wade Davis bill, saying, no, I don't want to punish the South. It's so funny because, like I asked you on Wednesday, like, who won Lincoln's assassination? Right? The South was super happy about it. Yeah, we killed it, we got it, but then now they're going to get... So we'll get that. Can't think more than one day ahead of yourselves, can you? And then Lincoln dies. Newsflash. Lincoln's dead and Johnson takes over. But one of the key early achievements that I'm going to argue is potentially the biggest thing Reconstruction accomplishes, at least on the ground level, is the Freedmen's Bureau. Super important because the Freedmen's Bureau, originally titled the Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands, is passed in March of 1865, with the idea being to give support, food, shelter, supplies, water, potentially land, for both freed blacks and displaced whites. White people who maybe came back and lost everything. or every one. But a lot of white families that lost their main breadwinner. You look at all those Confederate casualties, in general, they're almost all male, and they're almost all in the age 18 to 45, where you would be the primary provider for your family. All dead. This is where we first start to see the providing of education for freed slaves, for black people, via public schools and colleges. Many of the famous HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities, are founded in this era under the umbrella of the Freedmen's Bureau. That matters. It sets up a precedent that we can educate our citizens regardless of color. And it's a precedent that will be challenged significantly later. But for now, there's this important precedent that education matters no matter who you are, because as we've talked about in this class, education and knowledge and participation are necessary for democracy. And if we're not educated about what we're voting on, then what's the point of even having our voice heard? Freedmen's Bureau is super important for that. Of course, the Freedmen's Bureau is viciously attacked by northern racists and bitter Southerners who say, we fought this war for union, not to pay for a bunch of stuff for freed slaves. This is a waste of our money, and it's an overreach of federal authority. And a misuse of federal funds. I don't want my tax money going to support that. Too bad. My question for you is, what precedent does this whole thing set? What is this the first example of in American history? No, but you're on the right track. Welfare! The first welfare organization in American history. Federally funded, federal government paid for, tax dollar supported welfare organization. And we're going to look in a second, and we're going to look and see that the complaints about the Freedmen's Bureau as a welfare organization are very similar to the complaints about welfare today. It's come a long way, America. So you're going to take 2 minutes with your partner. I don't need you quiet. I need you thinking and talking. 2 minutes to get into this cartoon on your notes. It's up here on the board as well. What is the point of view of this cartoon? And be as specific as possible. 2 minutes. Go. Well, freaking 30 minutes in a class and 3 people have already gone. Go. Good. So have I. It's my fourth one of the day. Yeah, you know when I went to the bathroom?
Oh, yeah.
Nutrition. What did you say about? One minute left. What's the point of view? What is this cartoon trying to demonstrate?
This is like against the thing. Because it says support Congress and you support the New York system that president to protect the white man. You see?
And I have a free flashback, please. All right, 10 seconds. What is the point of view of this cartoon?
I didn't even, because I was reading the bottom.
All right, talk to me. Yes. You have a question? Ask us. Yeah. To a smaller extent. Instead of money in general, it's more about. Yes, that's what it says right here. Yes. I would love for you to answer it. Please, break it down for us, kid.
So it's from like a millionaire's perspective, saying that they're working off their butts just to give all their funds or their money to black via the Freedmen
Bureau.
Saying that they're working just so blacks don't have to work and can be like educated and given stuff.
Well done. Well done. That we, as white Southerners, are working so hard just so this freed slave can sit around on his ass. Yes, ma'am.
I think they're just trying to do the reverse racism, where like they can say like it's basically slavery is like a play on slavery. So like in this way like the white man enslaved the African Americans, so they have like certain privileges that they deserve.
Yeah. Yeah, in a sense, right? The Freedmen's Bureau is an agency to keep the Negro in idleness. What does that mean, idleness? Yeah, just not doing anything. At the expense of the white man. Twice vetoed by the president, but made a law by Congress. Support Congress? With all these Republicans in it? You support the Negro. Sustain the president. Who can we assume the president is at this point? Johnson, good. Then you protect the white man. We see the white guy working, plowing his fields. In the top right corner, it also says Negro troops were given $300, while white veterans were only given $100. First of all, it's a false statement. The reality is that black troops during the Civil War were paid a significantly less of a salary than white troops were. But hey, don't ever let facts get in the way of your narrative. You just go on believing your opinions, kids. So, the big complaint is that hardworking people are paying for these people to sit around on their asses. Question. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Yeah. Carla, why? Yeah. The complaint now, today, against welfare and food stamps is, I see these people at the store with their brand new iPhone, using their food stamps. I'm paying for their groceries because I get... It's the exact same complaint in 1865 as it is in 2017. Interesting, isn't it? Funny enough, the largest recipients of welfare are still in the southern states. So, that's the Freedmen's Bureau, huge success. And that leads us to Andrew Johnson as an introduction. We'll spend a lot of time on Johnson today and more time on Johnson on Thursday. My question for you in the notes is, what is wrong with Andrew Johnson as the president to oversee Reconstruction other than his hairline? Which I want to point out is terrible. You're president, man. Just shave it off. What is this? So Johnson is a unique character. Johnson's a unique character in history in that he's from Tennessee. He is from Tennessee. Tennessee, one of the 11 states of the Confederacy. Tennessee. He is from a state that left the Union. And he is the only senator that did not leave with his state. He's the only senator that does not leave with his state. Therefore, he's the only Southern vote in Congress, right, for 4 years. Johnson is a war Democrat. If you go back to the comparison of the Republicans, the war Democrats, the peace Democrats, he's a war Democrat, so he's pro-Civil War from the northern perspective. But he's incredibly racist. Not shocking in the 1860s, most people are, or 2017. He is a staunch supporter of states' rights. As the United States is about to undergo their biggest experiment with federal government overseeing of things, he's a states' rights believer. Problem one. Significant racist, clear racist. And he's from the South. He's now in charge of the policies that are supposed to bring the South back in and make sure this never happens again. He is a Southerner. He is anti-slavery. But he is anti-slavery from the perspective of it hurts common white people, not any worry for the actual slave. So let me ask you, from our class up to this point, who, if he's arguing that I resent the planter class, I'm anti-slavery because it keeps regular white people down, who is his argument most similar to? I know, it's on the tip of everybody's tongues. Oh, you're excited. I'm excited for you. He's a Southerner, yes. Whoever gets it, I'll give him $1. Oh, you already have $1? Show off. I don't. I'm promising you $1 I don't have. Freedmen's Bureau. Anybody? He's a Southerner who's anti-slavery, not because he's anti-slavery. He thinks slavery hurts white people. No, it's one name. You read him twice. Hinton Helper. Impending Crisis of the South. We read him twice. I know, and I told you last week, remember his name. Hinton Helper. He's in your notes a couple times. He publishes, before the Civil War, The Impending Crisis of the South, which argues that slavery, sure, racism's cool, but slavery's bad because slavery keeps the white people that are poor subjugated. Remember that now? Please nod at me so I feel better. Good. He's a clear white supremacist. We can't get around that. And he has two major issues of his presidency. Reconstruction we'll deal with today, and impeachment, which we'll deal with on Thursday. His plan looks a lot like Lincoln's. We'll pardon you if you promise to be loyal. But he doesn't want to pardon any Confederate leader who has $20,000 or more in property. He wants to make sure they stay punished. It's not because he wants to punish them, it's because he doesn't like the planter class, because he looks at them as the reason for all this conflict in the first place. Okay? Under his watch, he admits Confederate states back into the Union, who appointed governors, not elected governors, and who established their own voting procedures for state legislatures. So what he does is he allows Confederate states to take advantage of some gray area as long as they abolish slavery and they abolish the idea of secession from their state constitutions. So he's not pushing for equality or civil rights or progress. He's saying, as I told you before, the Union as it was. Put everyone back together, just cancel slavery, never secede again, and you're good to go. In this case, it's a very Jacksonian argument. Right? Racism's cool, but just stay in the Union. Jacksonian Democracy 101. The effect of his policies are that very quickly some former Confederates are elected back to office. Which, I don't know, if you're on the northern or southern side of things, it seems a little wrong to me to fight a war with your own country and then allow the people that waged that war against your country back into office. Just an opinion. We see very quickly black codes being enacted with laws specifically applied to black people. We'll get into that later. You'll read a couple examples from Mississippi. And presidentially speaking, he vetoes, cancels, which is his presidential right. He vetoes the Civil Rights Act of 1866. And he vetoes an extension or an addition of time to the Freedmen's Bureau. So two things that put power in his eyes back in the states and limits the extension of federal power. But that's his ideology. There's nothing in his ideology that says he would support a Civil Rights Act. It's federal government authority, it's for civil rights. There's nothing in his ideology that says he'd support a Freedmen's Bureau. It extends federal power, it's expensive, and it's not states' rights. Not shocking to anybody. Not shocking to anybody at all. So we're going to have a significant clash, which we're going to get into in a second, between Johnson and how he views Reconstruction, and Congress and how they view Reconstruction. So, turn your page for me, and we're going to get into this good political cartoon. Good, not my favorite. There's a better one later, don't worry. There's a better one later. So take just a minute 30, a good 90 seconds with your partner, and figure out, for me, what is this cartoon's purpose? What is it trying to demonstrate? And what is the historical context for what we're seeing in the cartoon? Okay? So 90 seconds to identify those two things and get into it with your partner. Go.
Congress, no, but Congress.
Yeah.
20 seconds. I need good answers. 36, not 25
Look what it
states.
says.
That's important.
Collision.
That is important.
Collision.
I know.
France and Colombia.
All right. So let me talk to you then. What conflict, just a nice little softball, what conflict is being demonstrated here, Jesus? Who versus who? The president versus the Congress. And what party controls this branch? What party has control of Congress? Political party. Where are you talking about? Republicans, good. And who's this guy over here? Who's this guy? Johnson, good. That's President Johnson. And what party is he from? He's a Democrat. He's a Union Democrat, but a Democrat nonetheless. So he's going to want things like what kind of rights? States' rights, good, right? He wants, remember, the Union as it was, Constitution as it is. They're going to want federal government authority over Reconstruction. So here's our conflict. Awkward collision on the Grand Trunk Columbia Railroad. And we see in the bottom, it's small print. I don't expect you to read it on your paper. It says, Johnson, the president, look here. One of us has got to go back. Clearly. And Congress says, well, it ain't me that's going to do it. You do it. A little clash. And what do we see up here? Carla, what does that say? 36, not 25 states. That's the key to this whole thing. How many states seceded in the Civil War? 11. So Johnson wants a full admission of all 36 states back in the Union. Let's just get back to business. And Congress is saying no surrender on that issue. It's a pretty cool train. That's that angry-looking train. Thomas the Tank Engine. All I know is they're both polluting the hell out of the air. It's terrible. They're both wrong. Yeah, Prius train. Good. Good. So that point right there being the key to this whole understanding is Johnson wanting the Union as it was. Back in, no questions asked, and we can move forward from there. Good job, guys. Good job. Now, everything changes in 1866. And this is my point to all of you that you need to vote in every election. Every time, not just when it's a presidential election, and not just when you really like the candidate. Every election matters, because in 1866 we don't have a presidential election, but we have congressional elections. For the House, for Senate, and we have significant radicals like Thaddeus Stevens and Charles Sumner, names I've already given you. And they're running in 1866 on this platform. Not every Democrat was a rebel. Not every Democrat seceded. But every rebel was a Democrat. Not everyone who left the Union was a Democrat, but everyone who did leave, I said that wrong. Not every Democrat seceded, but everyone that did secede was a Democrat. Which is not entirely true, but mostly true since, they didn't even have a Republican president on the Southern ballots. So their argument here is, who caused the Civil War? Democrats. Therefore, vote. Yeah, there we go. Good job. Vote, not Democrat, but Republican. So what happens here is in the House and the Senate, both houses of our Congress, House of Reps, and the Senate, the Democrats get more than 2/3 of the votes in both. That's called a supermajority, and it rarely happens in American history. Rarely. And let me show you why that matters. All right, anytime the Senate passes a bill, the House has to agree to it, and if they agree on a bill, who still has to sign it? President. Yeah, cool. Well, President Johnson. Good. So, if these guys are all Republicans and he's a Democrat, is he going to agree to their bills? No, not at all. So he either signs it now it's a bill, now it's a law, now it's legit, or he vetoes it. Now when a president vetoes a bill, like, for example, Andrew Jackson and the bank, you guys read the speech from Henry Clay trying to get Congress to override the veto. Congress can override a presidential veto if they have 2/3 of the votes, which almost never happens, because there's no way that many Americans can grant anything. But in this case, do they have more than 2/3 of the votes?
Yeah.
So literally everything they want to pass, Johnson can veto it, and it will not matter. He vetoes it, it goes back, they get 2/3 there, 2/3 there, now it's a law. There's nothing President Johnson can do about it. The example I used Thursday evening when we were still here, late into the night doing review, those loyal followers of you that were still here past my bedtime, when the power went out, it's true. If Congress wanted to, they could have passed a law that said President Johnson has to wake up every morning and run around the block of the White House butt naked. And of course he would have vetoed that. So that's embarrassing. You see my hairline? And they would have overridden the veto and it wouldn't have mattered. Haha, Johnson? Jazz out there around the block naked. That's how powerless the president is, in that it doesn't matter what he wants to veto, they have the votes to override it. This makes Johnson incredibly powerless, right? And the only good comparison here is like Tyler. After William Henry Harrison dies, and he's a president without a party, right? He's got kind of a Whig and kind of a Democrat, and either side trusts him, so he doesn't do anything, except at the very end to annex Texas. But other than that, this is the most powerless our presidency has ever been. Because the radical Republicans, the opposing house, have a supermajority in both houses. So they're going to pass a bunch of stuff that guarantees equal rights. Johnson's going to veto all of it, and it's not going to matter. And that's kind of how they're going to impeach him as well. That part's kind of shady. We'll get to that on Thursday, though. So now we move into our next phase of Reconstruction, when the radical Republicans or Congress is in charge. Congressional Reconstruction or Radical Reconstruction. Both titles work. So the political impact of that midterm election was that Johnson is powerless. Now, under this Reconstruction plan, one of the first things they do is pass the Reconstruction Acts of 1867. This enables Congress to use the military to force Reconstruction. This matters. It's going to divide the southern states into military districts, where the military will be enforcing laws to make sure the South is following what they're supposed to be following. Who has seen the movie Hunger Games? I have a theory, it's just a theory, that Hunger Games is based loosely on Reconstruction. The military is there after the people lost a rebellion, didn't they? That's why they're in districts, because they rose up and they got defeated. And the military is there in districts holding everybody down to follow the national government, which is far away. And eventually, the districts rise up and overthrow the military, and they go back to doing their own thing. I was 5 minutes into watching that movie with Alice and my wife, and I paused it. I was like, "Oh my God, this is based on Reconstruction." She's like, "Okay, first of all, I don't care. Just push play." And I was like, well, "This is why you shouldn't make me watch these stupid movies. So I'm going to pause them and tell you why they're historically inaccurate." Or yeah. Anyway, we watched the rest of the movie. I was silent. I sat on my hands and didn't push pause. But it matters. It matters. I'm telling you. So I can tell you guys, because you guys are a captive audience. You can't tell me to shut up and push play. So I'll use my theories on you. So in this case, they're going to say, no, these new states that still need to come back in the Union, all their constitutions before they come back in need to be approved by Congress. Who's Congress? Them. These radical Republicans. They're going to be really hard on the states to come in. The new states have to guarantee black suffrage. If you don't guarantee black suffrage, you don't get to come back in the Union. Again, we look at this as nice and morally outstanding, good for the radical Republicans. But the Republicans are looking at this and saying, if we make sure the black people vote, who are they going to vote for? Us. Boom, boom. Check, check. It's morally right, but it's also politically beneficial. And the states need to ratify the 14th Amendment. The states, before they even come back in, need to ratify the 14th Amendment. Now this leads us to our second Reconstruction Amendment. The first, obviously passed right after the Civil War, the 13th, abolishing slavery. Super important. I think the Reconstruction Amendments, 13, 14, 15, are as important to our nation's history as the Bill of Rights are. The 14th Amendment, and these are amendments you have to know, is the Citizenship Amendment. Kind of important. And it has 3 clauses that really matter, 3 little parts that really matter that you have to know. And they all deal with citizenship and what it means to be a citizen and what rights all citizens should have. The first clause is the Citizenship Clause. It says if you're born in America, you're an American citizen. Congratulations. That's new. It's called birthright citizenship. There's a lot of people, not a lot, there's a chunk of society that would still like to get rid of this because they don't like the idea of immigrants coming here and having kids and those kids being citizens. Well, yeah, they're born here just like you were. I don't really know what the problem there is, but that's my own beliefs. I'll stop that now. If you're born here, you're a citizen. Done. The second clause is the Due Process Clause, which matters as well. And it simply says that the government can't take away your life, your liberty, or your property without due process of the law. Yes, if I wanted to, we could take away Hector's car. If he's found guilty of a crime and he owes enough money that he can't pay for it and his car would. Done. We can't just arrest Vargas as much as we'd like to. We have to, if we're going to put him in jail, take away his life, his liberty, maybe his life. Yeah, that too, death penalty. We can't kill Vargas. Damn shame. We can't kill Vargas unless we find him. He goes through the due process of the law, which means you are charged, you are tried, you have a right to an appeal, and if that doesn't work and you're still guilty, then yeah, we can kill you. Not till then, though. Not till then. So the due process clause is important because in theory now we can't put freed slaves in jail just for being freed slaves. But the South will find a way around that. We'll get there. And the Equal Protection Clause. That any law you passed applies equally to everybody. This is the clause that is used to give rights under the law to undocumented immigrants. You can't deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. Does it say citizen? Does it say born in America? National? No. This is the thing that, for example, undocumented immigrants still have the right to trial by jury. Have the right to freedom of speech. Because any law you passed applies to everybody in its jurisdiction, not just citizens. That matters a lot as well. Interesting, right? Good job, radical Republicans. Under the radical Republican approach, Confederate leaders are disavowed. You can't hold office. If you wanted to take up arms against our country, then why should we let you hold office now in our country that you fought against? States are responsible for their own war debts. You racked up that debt, pay it yourself. And states would lose electoral votes if they started disenfranchising people, taking away people's right to vote. The right to franchise is the right to vote. So that's radical Reconstruction's plan. Through here, it's obviously much less lenient on the South and much more aggressive. We'll get into Andrew Johnson's impeachment, which also happens in radical Reconstruction on Thursday. And then also passed under radical Reconstruction is the 15th Amendment, which is our voting. We'll get there. That's going to happen later. So in theory, she asked about the grandfather clause and other things. The southern states will impose those requirements later. Okay? So we have 2 views for us to look at on your next page on this idea of a 15th Amendment. God forbid guaranteeing the right to vote to African Americans. So I'm going to have you take just 90 seconds and get into this one real quick. What is the point of view in regards to the 15th Amendment? And what's the context? And then we'll do the next one as well. So just a minute 30. Use your partner. Get into the cartoon itself. What is its point of view? Go.
That's against that. Yeah.
Because you could tell by like the way they depict them as well within the illustration.
because
It looks like, you see how like they're all like rushing into goals and like kind of keeping the white people out.
I the first thing I saw was
Yo.
only issue. That's what I saw.
Well, what?
The historical content is the 15th Amendment. That's a pretty establishment.
All right. So talk to me here. Amber, what do you think? Is this pro or anti passing an amendment that would give black people the right to vote? What do you think? Pro or anti? Anti. Cool. Why do you think so? What do you see up here that makes it you think this is an anti-amendment to let black people vote?
I don't know. I'm pretty guess, but it seems like they didn't let them in or something like that. I don't know.
Okay, potentially. Liz, you got some?
Yeah, I was gonna say what I was saying, like basically the riots were like blocking the way of the.
Are the whites? Well, first of all, how does this cartoonist portray the black people in this picture? Bells.
It makes it seem like they're uncivilized.
Uncivilized?
And like they're pushing to get their work out there. So like, I mean, to me it seems like it's like they're pushing the white people out from like sharing their opinion.
It's hard to tell. So I agree with you, but in both cases, it looks like the black people are running into the polls to vote and keeping out who?
White.
That look a little more civilized. This guy's got a top hat. What a show off. Who wears a top hat to go voting? And I'm going to say these guys look like, with the hats, veterans. Those look like Civil War uniform hats. So this argument that if we let them vote, our vote either will count less or we won't be allowed to vote. Good. We see down here, they're trying to say all these people are supporting the amendment, so don't vote for them. All they want is to make the Negro the equal of the poor white man, and then rule them both. So which party do you think this comes from? Democrats. Good. I like it. Good job. And then here's a different look. Take the same minute or so, and what is this one? How does this cartoon or piece of propaganda show the 15th Amendment in a different light? Go.
How
I think is this Frederick?
these three main people are being honored. Who's this?
I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure this is Frederick Douglass. And then, like even here, like you see how like it's like his own mural, and like how it's like
Being honored.
A lot of places.
so it kind of shows their
Their devotion.
Can't legislate morality.
Honoring here's legislating their education.
And plus, so you can see the contrast between the two. Like right here, their clothing is very like uncivilized, whereas here, like they're in like dresses and like hooks and stuff. See that?
Mm-hmm.
So you can definitely see the contrast between the two. And even then, like, isn't this like, is this like and plus you have the American flag.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So what do we see up here that demonstrates a different view towards the 15th Amendment? Thank you. And then yes, Go.
It says the right of citizens of the United States vote shall not be denied.
Yeah, that's the text of the 15th, right? The right to vote shall not be denied or abridged, said no to or changed, by the U.S. or any state on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. I don't care if you're black, white, brown, orange, yellow. It doesn't matter. I don't care what race you are, I don't care what color you are, or condition of servitude. What is that referencing? Yeah, it doesn't matter if you were a slave. We can't take away your right to vote. So now with constitutional amendments, we have abolished slavery. We have established citizenship by birth. And we have given the right to vote to everybody, except you ladies. Apologies, you have to wait for another
So like 1920s.
15, 16 more years, no big deal. 1919.
Oh.
And we see positives with this depiction, no? I see in the bottom left corner, it looks like education. They're having a nice geography lesson on South America. That's lovely. Nice to that big old globe. Education. Science. We have African Americans working in an industrialized field, looking much more dignified. And whose legacy are we honoring with this piece here? Lincoln's. Right there it is. Looking so happy with it. Good job, guys. So there's these two views on the 15th Amendment, but it's an amendment regardless. Too bad. They get to vote for now. So go ahead and skip the textual piece. I'll come back to that afterwards. But focus on the question at the bottom, please. Right under the text. Where it asks, what are some of the short-term positives? It's important we highlight the positives in Reconstruction. These three being some of them. Some of the short-term positives for African Americans in the South. And you have space in your next page to answer it. So,
A little taste of freedom, but they weren't able to like fully experience it.
a couple positives. The first is political recognition. African Americans, short term, are given voting rights via the 15th Amendment. It says so. Can't be taken away by any state on a condition of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. As Ms. Jimenez pointed out later, some states will get around this with things like literacy tests and the grandfather clause. And poll taxes, you got to pay to vote. That's ways that they'll get around it later. But short term, we see a huge increase in African American political participation. African Americans are voting in a huge number. And we'll look at some cartoons of that on Thursday as well, highlighting that success. Of course, with no surprise, via using our logic, African Americans affiliate with the Republican Party, because that's the party of Lincoln, the party of emancipation, the party of the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendments, and the party of this Congress and the Freedmen's Bureau that are working so hard to support them. So I would probably affiliate with the Republicans as well. Super exciting. 2 U.S. senators. The first 2 minority senators are elected to the United States Senate. Any ideas which state? Both from Mississippi. Both from Mississippi. So that shows short-term Reconstruction is working. They are electing representatives to their office, which is exciting. We'll talk about that for a second. The fact that we have 2 sitting senators that are African-American. That's cool. Sad. After these 2 in the 1860s and early 70s, the next African-American senator from all of America won't be elected for another 100 years. I told you. The North won the war, the South won Reconstruction. So it takes another 100 years. And to date, in 2017, to date, now, there's been 10 total. Goes to show you that, again, you can't legislate morality. 14 members of this House of Representatives are elected that are African American, which is fantastic. Much more important at the local level, 630 state legislators are elected who are black. And Louisiana elects a black governor. That's awesome. Good for you, Louisiana. But this disproves the myth that African Americans, this Southern myth at the time, and Northern as well, that African Americans are unfit for politics, unfit for public service. I don't know. We have this awesome, famous painting of the first colored senators and representatives. That's the title of it. In the first session of Congress that actually has sitting black representatives. Awesome. We see down here a depiction of Southern education. Educating young black people in the South. And we see here economic freedom. African Americans in the South farming their own cotton. So we see a desire by freed blacks for autonomy, to make their own decisions, and for opportunities. We see more of a continuity than a change, but African Americans pursuing their own churches that are independent from national denominations. We see African American public schools that are strictly for African American people. And these are all positives. However, we go through two programs that I'll get into today. One, sharecropping, and one, convict leasing, that both manage to relegate African Americans to a subjugated state. Very, very important. We'll go over both of them in a little bit, okay? But in both cases, we see a need by Southern white people to maintain their superiority economically and socially. This is more of an economic subjugation, and this is more of a social and political and legal subjugation. So, of course, we have a significant amount of white resistance in the South to this change. Right on our page. White resistance in the South to this change. This slogan, "The South will rise again," is echoed from Southerners in the Confederate Army as soon as the surrender at Appomattox is over. You read that in the perspective from Carl Schurz, which says they're going to rise again. They're just waiting for you to go away to do it. All right, who's seen the movie Friday? Yeah, that's the movie all the time. If you want to argue with me, we can fight. You'll lose. And they're critical of what, I forget his name, for always being quiet when Debo comes by. And he's like, oh yeah, like when he comes, like, I'll be quiet. When he leaves, I'll be talking again. Right, that's the South, right? When they leave, I'll be talking again. But what does that say for Southern supremacy? Right? When you leave, when you stop telling me what to do, I'm going to do whatever I want. Now, they formed the White League, which is more of a political organization, to push for white political supremacy, and eventually evolve or devolve, I'm going to talk about it, into the Ku Klux Klan, founded in 1867 by a man named Nathaniel Bedford Forrest, who was a former Confederate soldier, which is focused solely on black intimidation and white political supremacy. There's going to be 3 different eras of the Ku Klux Klan that we're talking about in this class. This is the first one. The first focus of the Klan is strictly racist. The second will include immigrants, alcohol, and women. All kinds of fun things to be opposed to. It sounds like a terrible way to live your life. And the third, that'll be in the 1920s, and the third will pop back up after World War II in the era of the Civil Rights Movement. So, the Ku Klux Klan is founded in 1867, and in response, the Radical Republicans in Congress passed the Enforcement Acts, which uses the military to suppress the KKK's actions, which works. The KKK kind of dies out, but it's for a couple reasons. They don't actually ever die out, unfortunately. They lose some of their influence, but for a variety of reasons, one of which is they no longer have to intimidate African Americans because these states begin changing laws and tweaking things to keep them down anyway. There's no need to have a secret organization when the government's doing it for you. Those are the enforcement acts that are passed by Congress. So now I have this cartoon. Oh, my question, what does the enforcement acts prove? It just proves that Reconstruction is only going to be successful as long as the military is there enforcing it. Right? When you have all these cool amendments and there still is an organization like the KKK pushing to intimidate African Americans, and Congress has to pass a law to use the military to enforce anti-KKK actions, it just shows that the South is not being reconstructed. And that's key. We'll get into the reasons why Reconstruction fails on Thursday. And one of those reasons is this lacking of desire on the South's part to modernize, to change, to improve themselves. All right. So I have a cartoon that I want you to spend some time on because it really matters. It really matters, and here's a better depiction of it. I'm going to have you take 2 minutes with your partner, and I don't need you filling out the specifics yet unless you want to, and you can. But really, what is this cartoon trying to say to society? Whose perspective is this? is the first cartoon from a man named Thomas Nast that we'll see a lot of in Period 6. He's arguably the most influential political cartoonist in American history. He's a Northern Republican, for context. And this is his perspective on what's taking place. So take 2 minutes with your partner and just get into this cartoon. What is it trying to demonstrate about society? Talk it out. Figure it out. It's kind of an ugly thing to look at, but it matters. 2 minutes, go.
Isn't this little image represent the unit that they want to break it?
I would argue that it's depicting how KKK are intimidating African Americans. Because you see how so you see how they're in fear and they do it with I remember I read how they intimidated them to prevent them from voting.
Got about 30 seconds left. What is this cartoon trying to demonstrate? What do we see here? Yes, that's a freaking Johnson line too. Interesting.
This isn't white man's government.
This is a white man.
Oh, right where? Oh, right here? I see that. So it's obviously showing white supremacy.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to stop you here in the interest of making sure we finish what I have planned to finish today. What are some things, I don't need an answer necessarily yet, but what are some things you notice? What stands out in this cartoon to you, Johanna, and then Lady Vargas? Okay, there's an African-American family holding a baby, okay? That's super important. What role do they play in this cartoon? Like, how does the artist portray them? As the victim. That's exactly what I was looking for. Good. Good. Lady Vargas, speak to us.
Under that, who do you think this is a white man's government?
This is a white man's government. What do they want, Miss Castellon?
The union as it
The
was.
union as it was. Interesting. Mr. Ventura, better be good.
There's the guy getting hung in the background.
There is a lynching in the background on this side. On this side, there is a school, we can assume a black school being burned. Likely where this victim came from, since that's a little ABC book. And who's responsible? The White League and the KKK. And they're working on this lost cause. An issue I don't have time to delve too deeply into. But there's this belief after the Civil War that the South was fighting a lost cause. The South was always going to lose. And they fought so valiantly and gallantly for their beliefs. But it's because of this oppressive federal government and all their manufacturing they lost. But the South will rise again. So what is Thomas Nast trying to say about society in the South during Reconstruction? Melissa.
Please say it again.
What is this cartoonist, Mr. Thomas Nast, trying to say about society in the South during Reconstruction?
Like,
Yes, they don't want Reconstruction, and
oh, that's what I was gonna say.
and
They're against slavery? Like, oh, and they're not against slavery?
Vargas, take a shot.
White supremacy.
Yeah. The Nast is trying to show people, hey, like, yes, we're trying Reconstruction and all that, but what's actually happening in the South is worse than slavery. Yes, ma'am.
So in a sense, isn't it showing how like the South is like resisting the Reconstruction?
1,000%. Right? It's demonstrating Southern resistance to Reconstruction. A lot of people see this and like, oh my God, it's such a racist cartoon. No. He's demonstrating what's actually happening racist-wise in the unreconstructed South. Does that help? Because always think to yourself, when you see cartoons like this, who would agree with it? And that helps you get your mind into What is he actually trying to get across? Good. Good, good. So flip your page. And you have a short excerpt of three small snippets of laws passed by Mississippi. I know. All I need you to do is just for 4 minutes, you're going to just skim these real quick. What are these laws designed to do? Who do they apply to? And maybe consider why they're passed. So just read them, skim them. You don't need to deep read the laws. What does it make illegal? Who does it apply to? What's the punishment? Go. What are these laws intended to do? What does it make illegal? Who does it apply to? We've got 2 minutes left. That's the key there. Good job. Questions? About 1 or so minutes left. 1 minute left, excuse me. What kind of stuff does it make illegal?
I think it's like not the first, what's the first one? Yeah, I think it's the second one. Where's the first one?
All right, so let me stop you there. What kind of stuff do these combination of black codes make illegal? That's what we're.
They don't want blacks interacting with like any whites.
Oh yeah, it makes that kind of stuff illegal. Is that a reasonable law? No. All right. What else, Maddie?
Well, they're not letting them like carry like firearms and all that stuff.
But what about our Second Amendment?
Oh, the second one.
What else does it make illegal? Georgie. What?
I didn't read that.
Well, probably should have read more. Go. What about the military service? It's trying to make the military enforce these laws that Mississippi wants to pass. What's the other thing you pointed out, Madeline? You asked about it? Homelessness. It makes homelessness a crime. Okay, potentially. What else is now illegal? Getting drunk. Or if you're a white person, providing the alcohol that gets that person drunk. Are any of these things reasonable laws?
No.
Not especially. Having firearms. Well, yeah, I don't know. And then, of course, if you're arrested, there's this fee, this fine. Can these freed slaves pay these fines? No. So now, what happens? Got to go to jail. Since you couldn't pay, you had a gun, I charged you $10 fine. You didn't pay the fine. Now you go to jail. And now, when you're in jail, who knows what's going to happen? You're probably going to do a bunch more crimes in jail. And we're going to have to extend your sentence another 5 years because you couldn't pay a $10 fine in 1871. And now we get into this thing called convict leasing. Maybe I own a large farm. Maybe I own this new developing field in the south of iron ore or coal mining. And now I can go to the jail, to the state of Mississippi, and say, I need to lease 100 people. What does lease mean? Yeah, pay to borrow. So now, myself, as maybe a former slaveholding Confederate, can go to the state and say, I'm going to pay the state X amount of dollars a month, and you're going to send me 100 of your convicts. I'm going to lease them to work in my mine, to work on my field. Tell me how this is any different than slavery. The difference is they committed a crime. And they couldn't pay their fines. Pay their fines with what money? From what job? With what education? So they're going to use convict leasing as a means to legally, we'll go back in slavery. Yes, T squared the third, and then yes, Val.
Wasn't this like from a loophole in the 13th Amendment?
In a sense, the 13th Amendment says, great question, Terry. You're back on my good side. The 13th Amendment says you can't be put in jail, you can't be lose your freedom without being convicted of a crime. So now they're saying, well, there's the crime. So now, in a sense, these states are making up crimes or setting punishment limits they know people can't meet. Super important that we understand that. I would argue it's not a loophole. That yes, you can lose your freedom for committing a crime. That's a good part of the law. But the way the loophole is created by passing laws that only apply to black people. So there we go. And that convict leasing program goes on for years and years. And the death rate is incredibly high, way higher than slavery. Why? Because they're not your property. You don't have to keep them alive. You can go lease another one from the jail. It's a really good book if you're ever interested called Slavery by Another Name. That goes into this program, what it looks like after the war. I read it. It really changed my views on Reconstruction. I own it, so if you want to borrow it, let me know. And it's a good look at the way the legal system, specifically in these Confederate states, changed the game, in a sense. Changed the game. Now, the other way that African Americans that are freed are kept in subjugation is more of an economic situation. That's sharecropping. So let me break this down for you guys real quick. Sharecropping, in theory, should have been a win-win. It makes a lot of sense. These are 8 people that have now been freed. Congratulations. How are they going to make any money? Do they have an education? No. Do they have options? Can they move north and get a manufacturing job? They don't know what they're doing. What do they know well? Yeah, they know how to farm. They know how to work on a plantation. So in theory, sharecropping is this system of the farm owner will give you land on his farm. In return, you'll give him half of your profit. In theory, this is a win-win. It's an option for people that wouldn't have had an option economically otherwise. But during the year, do they have any other way to make money before the cotton is ready? No, not at all. So when they need to buy food, who do they buy the food from? Where do they buy it on? Credit. When they need to buy clothes, who do they buy it from? Farm owner. What do they buy it on? Credit. When they need housing or they need to improve their living conditions, what do they buy it from? Farm owner. What do they buy it on? Credit. So what it looks like. The sharecropper is given land and seeds. In exchange, he wants to give the landowner half his crop at the end of the year. Then, the sharecropper buys food, buys clothing, buys supplies from who? The landowner's store. Where does he buy it on? On credit. The sharecropper does his job. He plants the crop. He harvests the crop. He sells the crop. He gives the landowner his crop to sell at the end of the year. And he gets half, as promised, and also everything extra from the year for food, for supplies, for this, for that. And now all of a sudden, you're underwater. You didn't sell enough cotton to make up for all the things you bought this year. Now next year you owe me 60%. Oh, then what? Again? Well, you had 2 kids. They ate a lot of food too. So next year you owe me 70%. When settling up, the landowner says that you owe more money than you earned. Sorry, sucks for you. So next year you got to give me a bigger share, and a bigger share, and a bigger share, and now you can't leave until you pay it back, and now you're stuck. Economic slavery. Because there's no other options for freed slaves, in many cases other than farming, they get stuck in this cycle forever. These slaves are uneducated. They can't argue with the landowners. It's a contract. They didn't meet their ends of the contract. Got to stay another year. Got to give me more money. You owe me money. You don't pay, I'll put you in jail. And then they're back in that convict leasing program. So in this way, the Southern economic system is able to keep their labor force in the South. We don't see a massive migration of slaves, of freed slaves, of African Americans leaving the South in great numbers until World War I. In the 19-teens, with all these manufacturing and industrial jobs, we see a huge break of this sharecropping system because people are leaving for the first time. World War II happens again, and that breaks sharecropping forever. But this lasts 80 years as an economic system of the South keeping their labor poor, uneducated, and on the farm. There's 2 groups we have to identify of white people in the South as well that are not liked by Southern Democrats. The first are scalawags. And these are Southern Republicans who are pro-progress, pro-manufacturing, pro-American system type programs. Like, let's do what the North did 30 years or 40 years ago and start using federal infrastructure and investments to start a manufacturing idea and some canals and roads and trains. And they're very pro-Northern politics, pro-Northern economic. So of course they're going to be hated by much of the South. And carpetbaggers are the other group. These are Northerners that get up and move to the South with all their belongings in a carpet bag, hence the name carpetbaggers. It's a good name. To try to invest or make money off of industrializing the South. Carpetbaggers are going south and buying plantations, for example, because everything's cheap, because it's all destroyed. Trying to invest in Southern manufacturing, and they're looked at as trying to take advantage of the South's plight, South's dilemma. Okay? In some cases, it's positive. There are people coming to teach in Southern schools, people coming to push for Southern progress. In other cases, it's more coming to profit off of the struggle of the South after the Civil War. So both groups are worth noting. You should know both of them, and that leads us to today with our final cartoon, which is fantastic. And my question to you, which I need you to answer, is what is the point of view of this cartoon? And how does this cartoon demonstrate early Northern feelings or support for Reconstruction? Let me give you some details. Who is this lady? Lady Liberty or Columbia, right? Signifying America as a whole. These people are asking for pardon, and this guy's asking for franchise, the right to vote. And the caption, you can't read it because it's blurry, because it's old. It says, "Shall I trust these men and not this man?" So just respond to that question while I pass out at the beginning of chapter 23, and then we will be done shortly and well on our way to Thanksgiving break. Tell me, what is this cartoon demonstrating about Northern support for Reconstruction?
What you got in the oh, there's about one.
Is this pro or anti-Reconstruction? I think it's quite clear. Pro-Reconstruction, yes.
Yeah, it's both of you.
Shall I trust these men and not this man?
What is the point of view? This is
Yo.
This is hard.
Word? You have one?
Sure. Come on.